Drunk father sold both of his daughters for a penny, but the human gave them love, hope, and a home. The penny was a single rust-pitted credit chip, tossed onto the grimy bar top with a clatter that was louder than a gunshot in the tense silence of the cantina. Jack snatched it before the other bidders. A trio of chrome-plated Xylar mercenaries could even snarl. The deal was done. The hulking four-armed father, stinking of fermented fungus and shame, stumbled away without a backward glance. Now Jax was left with his prize. Two alien girls huddled near the doorway like frightened, beautiful ghosts. The older one, Kyra, stood protectively in front of the younger, Ilara. She met his eyes with a glare that could melt Durasteel. Her jaw was set, her body coiled like a spring. Faint, intricate patterns like dark oil on water swirled across her skin, shifting with her barely contained rage. She was magnificent, and she hated his fucking guts. "Right," Jax muttered, running a hand through his sweat-damp hair. "Let's not stand around waiting for the runners-up to get ideas." The Xylar were already rising from their table, their metallic fingers flexing. One of them tapped the hilt of a vibro axe hanging at his hip. Shit. Jax hadn't thought this through. He was a traitor, a cargo hauler, not some kind of hero. But the look in the younger sister's eyes, pure, bottomless terror, had twisted something in his gut. He grabbed Kira's arm. Her skin was warm, smooth, and she flinched as if he'd burned her. "Move," he growled, his voice low and urgent. "My ship. Now." She didn't budge. Instead, she spoke, her voice a low, dangerous hum. "You have paid the price. You have made the claim. Do not mistake this for obedience, off-worlder." "Lady, I don't give a shit about your customs right now," he shot back, his eyes darting to the approaching mercs. "I'm trying to save our asses. Unless you want to find out what those shiny bastards paid for?" That got her. A flicker of something, fear maybe, but mostly cold fury, crossed her face. She grabbed her sister's hand and moved, her grace and speed startling. They flowed through the crowded cantina, Jack scrambling to keep up, the heavy thud of Xylar boots right behind them. The air outside Wreckhaven was thin and tasted of rust and ozone. The settlement was a chaotic mess of scavenged metal and flickering neon, built into the skeletal remains of a crashed warship. His ship, the Nomad, was on Landing Pad 7, a corroded platform overlooking a chasm of jagged, moon-dusted rock. They were almost there when the first plasma bolt screamed past his head, splashing a molten crater into the wall beside them. "Fuck!" Jax yelled, shoving the sisters behind a stack of cargo containers. "New plan!" Kira crouched, pulling Ilara down with her. She looked at Jax, her eyes narrowed. "You have no plan. You have only impulse. You have claimed us, yet you cannot even protect your own territory." Her words were like daggers, steeped in some kind of ritualistic contempt. "My territory is the inside of my ship, which we are currently on the outside of, in case you hadn't noticed," he snarled, peeking around the container. Two of the Xylar were advancing, their plasma rifles raised. The third was circling around. They were being flanked. "What is a claim to your people?" he asked, a desperate, insane thought sparking in his mind. "It is a statement of intent," she said, her voice tight. "A declaration of ownership, of a bond to be forged in trial." "Trial, huh?" Jax grinned, a feral, reckless expression. "Good. I was hoping you'd say that." He looked at her, then at her terrified sister, then back at the Xylar. His heart was hammering against his ribs, a frantic drumbeat of fear and adrenaline. He was an unlucky traitor, always in the wrong place at the wrong time. But for once he was going to see the bad deal through. "Your trial starts now," he said to Kira, his voice dropping. "Rule 1. The claim defends the claimant's life. You want me to be worthy of whatever the hell this is? Help me get us out of here alive." For a second she just stared at him, her otherworldly face unreadable. He saw the calculation in her eyes, the weighing of options. Her culture against her survival. Her hatred of him against her love for her sister. The Xylar were getting closer, their heavy footsteps echoing off the metal plating of the landing pad. Ilara whimpered, burying her face in Kira's side. That decided it. Kira's gaze hardened into lethal focus. She gave him a sharp, single nod. "The bond is a two-way current, human. You defend us. We defend you. This is the pact. Good enough for me." Jax breathed. He checked the charge on his own pitiful blaster pistol. It was barely enough to stun a grown Grox. This was going to be a shit show. He looked at Kira. On my mark, go for the one on the right. She didn't answer. She just smiled, a thin, predatory curve of her lips. It was the most terrifying and arousing thing he had ever seen. The trial had begun. The Xylar on the right rounded the corner, his rifle sweeping the area. Before Jax could even shout, Kira exploded from their cover. She moved with a liquid deadliness that defied her elegant form, a blur of motion and purpose. She didn't have a weapon, but she didn't need one. She slammed into the mercenary's side, her shoulder connecting with his ribcage with a sickening crunch of metal and bone. His rifle clattered to the deck. She twisted, her legs scything out to hook behind his knee, bringing the brute crashing down. Her hands, fast as serpents, found the exposed cabling at the back of his neck and tore it out in a spray of sparks. The Xylar convulsed and went still. It took less than 3 seconds. Jax just stared, his own blaster feeling even more pathetic in his hand. Holy shit, he whispered. The other 2 mercs opened fire, plasma bolts searing the air where Kira had been. She was already moving, weaving between crates with Alara in tow, herding her toward the Nomad's boarding ramp. "Human suppression!" she roared, her voice cutting through the chaos. It snapped him out of his awe. Jax popped up and fired 2 wild shots, not aiming to hit but to make them duck. The blue energy bolt spat harmlessly into the chasm, but it worked. The Xylar flinched, giving Kira the second she needed to shove her sister up the ramp. "Get inside! Seal the inner door!" Kira screamed at Alara, before turning back to face the fight. Jax laid down another covering shot as he scrambled backward toward his ship. A bolt hit the container next to him, showering him with hot metal fragments. One sliced his cheek open. Fuck! He wiped the blood away with the back of his hand, the coppery iron scent filling his nostrils. Kira met him at the base of the ramp, her eyes fixed on the cut on his face, and for a half-second, her expression was strange, intense, a deep hunger. Then it was gone, replaced by tactical coldness. "They are too focused," she said, her chest heaving slightly. "They believe their numbers give them the advantage. They are wrong." "Glad you're so confident," Jax panted, his lungs burning. "I'm fresh out of brilliant ideas." "Then follow mine," she commanded. She looked at the blood on his cheek again, then at her own hand. Using a sharp fingernail, she sliced a shallow cut across her own palm. A line of dark, almost black blood welled up. "What the hell are you doing?" he demanded. "Strengthening the pact," she hissed, her eyes glowing with feral intensity. "The claim is weak, a word, a coin. Blood makes it real." Before he could process what was happening, she lunged forward, not at the enemy, but at him. She grabbed his face, her bloody palm smearing against the cut on his cheek. The moment her blood touched his, the world went sideways. It wasn't pain. It was a connection, a sudden, violent jolt of pure information. He felt her rage, a cold, hard diamond of it directed at her father, at the Xylar, at him. Beneath it, a fierce, desperate protectiveness for Alara, and under that, a deep, aching loneliness from a wound long past, a broken bond, a scar on her soul that matched the one he'd seen on her back. His vision swam. The sounds of the firefight faded to a dull roar. He could feel her heartbeat in his own chest, a frantic, powerful rhythm. He saw flashes of her memories, a temple of polished bone, a ritual duel under a binary sun, the betrayal that led to her exile. It was too much, a psychic data dump that threatened to shatter his mind. He staggered back, breaking the contact, his hand flying to his cheek. The mixed blood felt like fire on his skin. What did you do?" he gasped, looking at her with new eyes. Fear, and something else. Awe. Kira looked just as stunned. Her hand was trembling. "The resonance," she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. "It should not be this strong, not for a soft skin." A plasma bolt slammed into the ramp controls, showering them in sparks and forcing them the rest of the way up into the ship. Jax hit the switch to close the ramp, the heavy durasteel door groaning shut, cutting them off from the firefight and sealing them inside. The ship was plunged into the dim, red glow of emergency lighting. Silence, thick and heavy, descended. It was just the 3 of them in the cargo bay. Ilara was huddled by the inner airlock, her eyes wide. Kira was staring at him, her lips slightly parted, her bloody hand held out as if she'd just touched a high-voltage conduit. The claim wasn't just a word anymore. She'd made it real. He could feel her, a low thrum at the back of his consciousness, a ghost in his machine, a foreign presence that was angry, proud, and inextricably tangled up with him. He could still taste her blood, and with it the echo of her soul. "You have a lot of fucking explaining to do," Jack said, his voice rough. He wasn't just her claimant anymore. He was something else, and whatever it was permanent. Her trial had just become his. He had a feeling the next rule was going to be a hell of a lot more complicated than, "Don't die." "There is nothing to explain," Kira said, her voice strained as she finally lowered her hand. She wouldn't meet his eyes. "You saw. The blood pact seals the first stage of the claim. It attunes the claimant and the claimed." "Attunes? Lady, I just saw your entire life flash before my eyes. That's a bit more than attuned." Jack shot back, stalking toward the cockpit. He needed to get them the hell off this rock. He could feel the Xyler pounding on the ramp outside. "I felt your pain," he admitted, his voice quieter. The broken bond." At that, her head snapped up. The anger was back, mixed with a raw, shocking vulnerability. "You saw that? You have no right." "I didn't ask for it," he yelled, turning back to face her. "You're the one who went all voodoo blood magic on me. What the hell was that scar on your back? What happened?" "It is none of your concern, human," she snarled, taking a step toward him. Ilara made a small, frightened sound. Kira stopped, her fury faltering as she glanced at her sister. She took a deep, shuddering breath, visibly reining in her temper. "My former bondmate was unworthy. He failed his trial. The bond was severed. It is a mark of shame. That is all you need to know." Jax fired up the engines, the deck vibrating as the ship's fusion core came to life. The pounding on the ramp grew more frantic. "Right. Unworthy. Got it," he said, sarcasm dripping from his words. "So what's my trial? Because if it involves any more psychic home movies, I'm gonna need a drink first." He strapped himself into the pilot's seat, his hands flying over the controls with practiced ease. The ship lurched as he disengaged the mooring clamps. "Your trial is to prove you are worthy of the claim you made," she said, her voice now cold and distant. She and Ilara had moved to the back of the small cockpit, watching him. "To provide sanctuary, to protect, to sustain." "Sustain?" he asked, pulling back on the stick. The Nomad lifted off the pad, the Xyler's angry shouts fading as they ascended into the moon's thin atmosphere. "You mean food and water, right?" He glanced back at her. Kira's expression was unreadable, but a faint, dark flush was rising on her cheeks. "Among other things," she said cryptically. Jax narrowed his eyes. "Oh no, 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 no. Is sustain some kind of ritualistic code word for, you know?" He made a crude gesture with his hand. Ilara giggled nervously, then hid her face when Kira shot her a warning look. Kira's chin lifted defiantly. "A true bond is holistic. It provides for all needs, physical, emotional, spiritual." "Right. Holistic. This just gets better and better," Jax muttered, pushing the throttle forward. The ship shot into the blackness of space. He set a course for the nearest asteroid field, a good place to hide and figure out his next move. The thrum of her presence was still at the edge of his thoughts. It was distracting, a low-level hum of pride and fury and something else he couldn't name, something warm and liquid that made his own pulse quicken. This was insane. He'd bought 2 slaves to save them, and now he was accidentally soul-bonded to a disgraced warrior princess who thought he was her new lord and master, a role he was in no way qualified for or interested in, and she apparently expected him to sustain her. Fuck his life. They found a hollowed-out asteroid, a relic of some long-dead mining operation, and powered down the Nomad to go dark. The silence inside the ship was absolute, broken only by the hum of the life support and their own breathing. It had been 12 hours of suffocating tension. Ilara had fallen asleep in one of the cargo hammocks, but Kira hadn't rested. She sat on a crate across from him, sharpening a knife she'd produced from a hidden sheath on her thigh. The scrape of steel on stone was the only conversation they'd had for hours. Jax couldn't take it anymore. Are you going to stare at me like that all night? He finally asked. Kira didn't look up from her knife. I am observing my claimant, assessing your worth. And what's the verdict, Your Highness? He asked, his voice laced with sarcasm. I am undecided, she said, her voice a low purr that did things to his insides he didn't want to acknowledge. She finally met his gaze, her eyes dark and serious in the dim light. You show courage. You risked your life for us. But you are soft, undisciplined. You mock a sacred bond you cannot comprehend. It's not my bond. It's yours, he countered, standing up and pacing the small cargo hold. He felt like a caged animal. He could feel her watching his every move. I just wanted to get you two somewhere safe. That's it. End of story. I'll drop you on the next civilized outpost, give you some credits, and we all go our separate ways. Kira rose to her feet in a single fluid motion, her sudden proximity making the air crackle. She was close enough that he could smell her, a faint, clean scent like ozone and warm stone. There is no separate ways, she said, her voice intense. The blood is shared. The pact is made. To abandon the claimed is to invite ruin upon the claimant. Your spirit would wither. Your luck would turn to ash. You would die. That's a steaming pile of superstitious bullshit. Is it? She challenged, taking another step closer. You felt the resonance, human. You felt me. Do you think you can just walk away from that? That my soul will not cry out for yours across the void? Her words hit a little too close to home. The hum of her presence was a constant, a new part of his baseline reality. The idea of it just vanishing was unexpectedly unnerving. He felt a phantom ache from the memory of her severed bond. He didn't want to feel that for himself. Before he could form a reply, she reached out and touched the now scabbed cut on his cheek. Her touch was surprisingly gentle. This mark, she whispered, her thumb tracing the line of dried blood. It binds you. To me. To my fate. His heart was hammering. He could feel the heat of her body, see the intricate patterns on her skin shifting in the low light. Her eyes were locked on his mouth. The air was thick with unspoken things. This was it. The sustain part of the deal. His body was reacting before his brain could, a primal pull toward her that was more than just lust. It was the bond, the goddamn blood magic. It wanted this. It needed this. Jax's hand came up and circled her wrist, stopping her. His thumb brushed over her pulse point. It was racing as fast as his. And what if I'm not worthy? He asked, his voice rough, barely a whisper. What if I fail the trial, like the last guy? Kira's eyes flashed with a dangerous light. Then I will be the one to sever the bond, she said, her voice dropping to a husky, provocative growl. And I will carve my mark of shame onto your back myself. The threat, meant to intimidate, did the exact opposite. It was a challenge, a gauntlet thrown. The line between fight and flirtation, between dominance and desire, had just been erased. He saw it in her eyes. She was testing him, pushing him, daring him to take what he had claimed, to prove he wasn't soft, to prove he was strong enough to handle her. Is that so? He murmured, pulling her wrist until she stumbled a half-step closer. Their bodies were almost touching. He could feel the tension radiating off her, a mix of defiance and a deep humming need that echoed the one coiling in his own gut. She didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned in, her lips hovering an inch from his. Show me, human, she breathed. Show me the strength of your claim. That was all it took. He closed the distance, his mouth crashing down on hers. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a collision, a battle of wills. Her lips were soft but demanding, her taste wild and intoxicating. She met his ferocity with her own, her free hand tangling in his hair, pulling him closer. It was a brutal, desperate kiss, full of all the anger and fear and unwanted connection that had been simmering between them. He backed her against the cold metal wall of the ship, his body pressing hers into the bulkhead. She clawed at his shirt, a low growl rumbling in her throat. This wasn't seduction. It was a crucible. The bond between them flared, no longer a subtle hum but a roaring inferno. He felt her history, her pride, her pain. And she, he knew, was feeling his. The loneliness of a life spent in the void. The cynicism that masked a deep-seated decency he rarely let anyone see. Her hands went from his hair to his shoulders, pushing him back. For a heart-stopping second, he thought she was rejecting him, but her expression wasn't angry. It was raw, stripped bare. Her eyes, wide and luminous, were locked on his. She was seeing him, all of him. He reached up, his hand cupping her jaw, his thumb brushing over the faint, swirling patterns on her skin. He was lost, completely and utterly lost in her. This was the trial, not of strength, but of surrender. He lowered his head again, and this time the kiss was different. The fight was gone, replaced by a deep, shuddering need. She sighed into his mouth, her body melting against his. He could feel the shift in her, the moment the warrior gave way to the woman, the moment her defiance surrendered to the pull of the bond. From the pilot's chair to the floor of the cargo bay, clothes were torn away with frantic haste, discarded without a thought. The dim red light of the ship cast them in shades of blood and shadow, her skin a canvas of shifting, dark patterns against his. He laid her down on a pile of emergency blankets, the rough fabric a stark contrast to the impossible softness of her skin. From her point of view, the universe narrowed to him. The bond, once a foreign invader, was now a roaring current of sensation, pulling her under. She felt his awe, his desperation, his surprising tenderness. It was nothing like her first bonding, which had been a cold, political ritual. This was chaos. This was fire. This was real. He explored her body not as a conqueror, but as a pilgrim discovering a sacred land. And when he finally entered her, she cried out, a sound that was half pain, half ecstasy. The bond between them exploded, a supernova of shared sensation. She felt his climax as if it were her own, a blinding wave of light and pleasure that ripped through her, and her own release followed a second later, a shattering tremor that left her gasping and boneless in his arms. In the aftermath, as their hearts hammered in unison, something new settled between them, a new mark, invisible but infinitely stronger than the one of mixed blood on his cheek. During the peak, she had felt an ancient instinct rise within her, a biological imperative of the claim. Without thinking, she had bitten down on his shoulder, hard, a mark, her mark, on him. As the haze of pleasure cleared, she felt a jolt of panic. She hadn't meant to. It was too soon. It was a finalization. Jax flinched, his hand going to his shoulder. He touched the teeth marks, then looked at his fingers, slick with a trace of his own blood. He looked at her, his eyes wide with confusion and a dawning understanding. What was that? He asked, his voice hoarse. Kira couldn't speak. She had just irrevocably tied this soft, infuriating, courageous human to her. She had claimed her claimant. The trial wasn't over. It had just entered a new, terrifying, and irreversible stage. The next morning, the silence in the ship was different. It wasn't tense anymore. It was heavy with consequence. Jack sat in the pilot's seat, nursing a cup of hot synth-caf, the bite mark on his shoulder a throbbing, physical reminder of the line they had crossed. He kept replaying it in his head. The fight, the surrender, the branding. Kira sat across from him, watching him with an unnerving mix of proprietary pride and deep-seated anxiety. Elara, blissfully unaware of the specifics, just seemed relieved that they weren't about to kill each other anymore. So, Jack said, finally breaking the silence. The bite mark. I'm guessing that wasn't just you getting carried away. Kira straightened, adopting a formal, almost regal posture. It is the seal of the consummation. It signifies the bond is accepted, finalized. Finalized, Jax repeated flatly. So I passed the trial. You survived the trial, she corrected, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. The worthiness part is an ongoing assessment. He snorted, a dry, humorless sound. Great. So what does this finalized bond mean exactly? Besides you getting to chew on me like a piece of jerky. Her smile vanished. It means my fate is now yours. My enemies are your enemies. My people. Should we ever find them again, will see you as my chosen mate. Your mate? The word hit him like a punch to the gut. This had gone from a rescue mission to a one-night stand to a fucking marriage in the span of a day. And what about your enemies? I'm guessing the Xylar weren't the only ones you pissed off. My former bond mate, Kale, she said, her voice turning to ice. He is of a powerful clan. When I challenged his cowardice and our bond was severed, my sister and I were declared outcasts, pariahs. My father sold us to rid himself of the shame. Kael will not tolerate another claiming me. He will see it as an insult to his honor. He will hunt us. Wonderful. Jack sighed, rubbing his temples. So we've got psycho mercs and a jilted ex-boyfriend with a powerful clan after us. Anything else? You secretly the Empress of the Galaxy? Got a death mark from the High Council? She looked away. My bloodline is significant. It is why the bond resonated so strongly. It is why Kael's failure was such a disgrace. Jax just stared at her. This kept getting deeper and deeper. He was just a traitor, a guy with a fast ship and a bad habit of helping people. Now he was bonded for life to some kind of exiled alien nobility, with a powerful, homicidal ex. He should have been terrified. He should have been looking for the quickest way to sever this bond. Consequences be damned. But as he looked at her, at the fierce pride warring with fear in her eyes, and then at Alara, who was watching them both with hopeful apprehension, he didn't feel fear. He felt a strange, unfamiliar sense of purpose, a sense of home. All right, Jack said, turning back to the cockpit controls. He powered up the ship, the engine's hum filling the silence. New plan. Kira raised an eyebrow. Oh, your ex is powerful. He'll have resources. He'll be tracking us. The Xyler are probably still sniffing around this sector, too. Running and hiding isn't a long-term solution. He pulled up a star chart, the holographic display painting his face in blue light. He zoomed in on the outer rim, a lawless, chaotic stretch of space known as the Ashen Veil. We're not going to run, he said, his voice firm with a newfound resolve. We're going to get answers, and we're going to get leverage. Kira moved to stand behind him, her hand resting lightly on the back of his chair. He could feel the warmth of her touch, the steady thrum of the bond between them. It was no longer jarring, but comforting, a quiet strength at his back. What do you have in mind, my claimant? She asked, the title no longer a challenge, but a term of endearment. Your father, Jack said, his eyes fixed on the chart. He sold you. He betrayed you. A man like that, who sells his own blood for a pittance, is a man drowning in debt and desperation. He's weak, and weak men have secrets. He plotted a course for a notorious black market hub, a station called Port Regret. We're going to find out who he owed, what forced his hand. Kael might be powerful, but power creates enemies. We find your father's dirty laundry, and we find a weapon to use against your ex. Kira stared at the back of his head, a slow, genuine smile spreading across her face. He wasn't soft. He wasn't weak. He was clever, and he was fighting for them. Not because a ritual demanded it, but because he had chosen to. A traitor's solution, she murmured, a note of admiration in her voice. Find the leverage, exploit the weakness. You got it, Jack said, a grin of his own tugging at his lips. He glanced back at her, at the bite mark on his shoulder, at the two sisters who had turned his life upside down. He wasn't just a traitor anymore. He was a claimant, a mate. He had a family to protect. He sold you for a penny, Jack said, his voice low and full of promise. I'm going to make him pay for it with everything he has left. He pushed the throttle forward, and the Nomad surged into the void, leaving the haunted asteroid field behind. They weren't running from their past anymore. They were flying toward a future, one they would have to fight for, together. The bond between them hummed, a silent oath in the dark. Their journey to Port Regret was a crucible that forged their new reality. The close quarters of the Nomad forced an intimacy that went beyond the physical. Jax learned the cadence of her speech, the way the patterns on her skin would darken with anger, or shimmer with amusement. He learned that Alara had a gift for coaxing the ship's nutrient synthesizer to produce something that almost tasted like real food. Kira, in turn, learned about him. She learned that his sarcastic shell was armor against a life of loss and solitude. She learned about the failed colony on Cygnus X-1, where he'd lost his parents, the tragedy that had set him on a lonely path among the stars. One night, while Alara slept, Kira found him staring at the star chart, the bite mark on his shoulder a dark sigil in the faint light. You are troubled, she stated, her voice soft. It was no longer a guess. Through the bond, she could feel the edges of his melancholy. Just thinking, he said, not turning around. This is a hell of a mess I've gotten you into. I promised you hope and a home. So far, all I've delivered is a galaxy full of people who want you dead. She came to stand beside him, her presence a solid, comforting weight. She traced the lines of the star chart with a slender finger. Before you, we had no hope. We had only a price, one credit. That was our worth. She turned to face him, her eyes fierce. You have given us more than a home, Jax. You have given us a future worth fighting for. The claim is not a burden. It is my shield, and yours. He finally looked at her, truly looked at her. He saw the warrior, the exile, the sister. But now he also saw his partner, his equal. The anger and defiance had been replaced by a loyalty so fierce it was breathtaking. He reached out, his hand finding hers, their fingers lacing together. The bond flared warmly between them. It was no longer a chain, but an anchor. Port Regret was a cesspool, a hollowed-out moonlet crammed with criminals, smugglers, and information brokers. Jax navigated the Nomad into a docking bay with practiced ease, his trader instincts on high alert. He left Kira and Alara on the ship with a warning. Stay put, keep the doors sealed. I'll make contact with an info broker I know. This place is no joke. Kira nodded, her hand resting on the hilt of her knife. Be careful. I can feel your anxiety. Do not let it make you reckless. Ah, you do care, he teased. But the warmth in his chest was real. He felt her concern as a steady pressure, a tether. He moved through the chaotic corridors of the station, the air thick with sweat, cheap booze, and desperation. He found his contact, a weaselly Rhodian named Grek in a dingy gambling den. For a hefty price, Grek sang. The story was uglier than Jax had imagined. Kira's father hadn't just been in debt. He'd been caught cheating Kale's clan in a mining deal. The sale of his daughters wasn't just to pay a debt. It was a public act of subjugation, a ritual apology demanded by Kale himself to demonstrate his absolute power over their bloodline. But there was more. Kale was consolidating power, preparing to challenge the clan elders. He was ruthless and he'd made enemies. Grek gave Jax a name, a rival clan leader who had also been wronged by Kale, a warrior who was looking for any weakness to exploit. It was the leverage he needed. As he headed back to the ship, a cold knot of dread formed in his stomach. The tether, the connection to Kira, was screaming. It was a silent, psychic shriek of pure terror. Not hers, Ilara's. He broke into a run, his heart pounding. The bond was a two-way street. He felt their fear, and they would have felt his.